So hello guys, today is the 7th of April 2022. I'm gonna talk today about a bit more about Ukraine, and not so much Ukraine. I'm gonna talk about how the Ukrainian war in Ukraine has ended up influencing the gas and petrol price, influencing gas and petrol prices, and why is this all pretty much bullshit, right? But before we're gonna go and talk about the gas, oil prices, and things like this, right? We're gonna do something else. Well, so today I'm gonna make it a bit more interactive. So things I talk about, I'm gonna look them up. I'm gonna put them on this screen, and uh, we're gonna use them as an examples, and we're gonna look things up so that my words are not just empty. So there's some picture changing on the screen. So, and the first thing I want to show you, and it's going to be a picture. And Google is playing up. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, so the picture is going to be of okay, yes, so we're going to use this image. Facebook, look, we just want to watch it to see an image, right? Okay, so open image is a new tab. So, okay, we're going to make it a bit bigger. And this is an image from my home city, Kherson. This is the only Ukrainian city which has been captured by Russian troops. And we're going to look at this one, which is a central market. So this is essentially like a variation of a street market. And there were more than one of those. One was in the center, and there were a couple in other districts of the city. And they have existed there since the times of the Soviet Union. Now, this market is like 50 years old. So it's a old kind of thing. Why we're looking at this picture? Well, we're looking at this picture because the story is going to be about this particular place and market economy. As it happened in the Soviet Union, the people who lived in the countryside and who worked in the villages, they were not getting very high wages. But what also was happening is they would be getting lots of feed for their animals. So they have chickens, they have cows, they have pigs and things like this, and something they could keep on their own. And then they would grow them, and then obviously at some point of time they will kill them, and then they would want to either keep the meat for themselves or the produce of their labor, or sell some of it on, it's like depending. And these markets existed for sole purpose for the villagers to come over into the city. Like sometimes they just arrange it as a group, and then they would use these markets to sell their produce to the city folk. So that kind of alleviated a little bit of a stress on a food supply system in many cities, especially in a city like mine. There was lots of countryside around it, lots of villages, lots of people coming over and just selling eggs, meat, milk, the lot. And they would come to this market, and that's actually the basics of a market economy. Whereas the producer sells something to a user. Okay, so that's the basic description of a market economy, where I produce something, I sell it to you at the agreed cost, and we can haggle, and at the end, we reach a certain price. Now, I do understand that some people who grew up in shitty areas of Soviet Union, they did not have that. I understand. I grew up in Ukraine. I did not grow up in the rest rest of the Soviet Union. But that was the basics of it. Why are we talking about this? Well, now we're going to talk about something which is called speculation. Now, speculating was outlawed in USSR. So we're talking about the old times. And what was considered a speculation? It was when you would come over and you would buy something from the villagers, right? You buy it all up and then you sell it to the users. So they were saying the only person that the only ones that can be a middleman is the government, right? Other than that, nobody is allowed to speculate. So all the shops were owned by the government, everything was owned by the government. Right? Speculation was outlawed, so you could not just come over and say to the villagers, okay, I'm gonna buy all this all up, and then I'll be like the guy reselling. But obviously, this kind of market economy where, works only if you villages are like nearby and they can travel easy and things like this. So over the old times, there were people who dealt in supply chains and things like this. So, but we're not gonna go there. Here we're gonna make it pretty simple, right? Producer to the user. That's it. We're done. And then what happened when the Soviet Union fell apart? Right, this particular market has been taken. It was this area was where they sold food. This particular pavilion, this is where they sold meat products, meat and milk products, cheese, and then there's an area down here where they used to sell, like they still sell there a lot of times, fruit and veg. So like, because this one was a controlled area to make sure that the meat is good and things like this, and there's no extra dust going on it and things like that. So, and there was a little area down here where they used to sell, like for example, if people had like fur animals, they grow them like rabbits. Like my aunt used to grow rabbits and some other little animals, and then they'd make hats out of them, or like, I don't know, sometimes they'd make collar for your coat or sell things like this, which you could go there and you could buy and then you could use it as well. So there are like three areas of the markets. Now the main area of the market in the beginning of the 90s has been taken over by a bunch of criminals, right? They were like local variation thugs, and the system they've introduced involved a lot of speculation. And how did this work is very simple. These people when the villagers would come to sell things on the market, they'd use different ways of stopping the villagers of being able to sell the product themselves. And then what they would do is they would buy off of them, often at a discounted price, but like expensive enough to make it worthwhile for the villagers to come back, but nevertheless at a lower price. And then they would have their own people resell the produce, and they would make it look like they are actually competing with each other, but most of the time they're not. They pretty much belong to the same criminal group. It still runs the market. Now they're official businessmen, but still same criminals that have taken over the market in the 90s. Right? And that has been happening there like this now. So why are we talking about this? Well, when the new rules of trade, selling oil on exchange, oil exchange, and other goods exchange have come up, right? We're gonna go here. So, and we're gonna make a little picture of basics of the market economy. We're gonna use this one. Okay. Producer, user. Why is this very important? Well, at some point of time, I think during like 60s, 70s, people were like, hey, the oil companies, they own the part of the business which actually gets the oil and gas out of the ground. And then they also own the parts, they also quite often own the parts of the business which were producing. So whether it was petrol, whether it was other things, right? So, like for example, Shell would own both the oil production, getting the oil off the ground, but also they would own oil refineries, making oil into petrol and many other things. Excuse me. Right, and it gave them quite a bit of power. Right, so and then what happened is that people came up with a bright idea. Right, I'm not going to draw a bright idea here because it was not a very bright idea. But they decided the way we're going to control this is we're going to make sure that companies like Shell are broken up into the companies that actually get the oil and gas out of the ground and into other businesses. Right? Because that would ensure that the companies that get the oil out of the ground are selling their produce at the fair price, not just to their own refineries, not just to their own users, but to other users. User and user. Pardon my bad drawings. Right? And it was kind of trying to create a system where other users were getting a fair price. So keeping the basic producers, like, competing with itself, because obviously creating this. Unfortunately, what happened over the years is that, well, the companies like Shell and many others, they have caught up on the act. So they broke up their companies, but now they were selling their companies. At first they competed that, and then they went like, oh, wait a minute. Us selling to our own refineries at a market value over the normal value means that we can know, number one, charge as much as we want for the gas and oil that we're selling within obviously market rates-ish. Then we can claim back on taxes, but also means that here we can actually charge when our refineries, right, now refineries become the producers, and the producers can sell these producers can sell their products to other users, which would be you and me, for petrol or gas or things like this, and they can sell them at other market rates, right? So they were like, hey, and then we can get lots of cashbacks and things like this. But then what happened is the people who are not actual users started coming into the market, right? And this is why the modern market, because we ended up having users which are not users. They're essentially there for the capital gain. Most of them have got no fucking idea how the digging the oil out of the ground works. Most of them have got no fucking idea how this side of the business works. They essentially become the middleman. Where is my eraser? So, okay, so now there is no direct truth. There's just a lot of speculators. Remember, the story about the market, where the speculation in the Soviet Union was illegal, and then the criminals came in, right? So they're essentially not the criminals, but they're abusing the system. They saw a hole in the system and they went, hey, great. And these guys like Shell, like Mobile, whatever other companies are there, right? These few companies in US, they were like, oh great, we can put some guys in here as well, because look, there is this huge hole in the system, there's a gaping hole in the system where most of the people haven't got a fucking clue how things work, but they want to make money on it, right? So, and close as we moved on into 80s, 90s, and 2000s with computer algorithms deciding how much the value of things are. Now that works out pretty fucking well. As somebody who used to work for Amazon deliveries at some point of time, and who knows how their computer algorithms are good at working out the routes for the drivers, I'll tell you, I know that those algorithms are brilliant, right? They only make mistakes in about 50% of the cases. I mean. So now these companies, because the shell and oil production and oil refineries, they're still under the grade of Shell, right? And other ones are like this as well. So they own both sides of the business under umbrella, but the businesses are separated. But now there is like lots and lots and lots of middlemen who essentially never touch the oil in their hands, right? They don't know how it's properly produced, and they don't have any clue how it's properly used. They just say, hey, we've got a tool where we can buy a piece of paper from this guy, from the producer, that says that he's gonna sell some oil in like next, I don't know, 12 months to us, right? And if we can get hold of this paper and hold for it for 3 months, the value of this paper is gonna go up, and we can sell it then to this guy, hopefully at the highest point. But that's how it works. So essentially, our current gas prices are not really set up by a direct producer to user market system. They're set up by a bunch of speculators who quite often just care about getting as high profits as they possibly can in the system most people don't fucking understand. While they have no fucking idea how this side of the business works, where's my pen? So, no idea, right? And they have no idea how this side of the business works. Zero understanding. They just know how this bit in the middle works. So, at the moment, we got back through the system. We got through the understanding of that this is not a true market system. So, to really have a pure market system, what we need our politicians to have the testicles, which they do not, and to go like, hey, we're not gonna take payoffs from these guys anymore, right? We're not gonna jump in bed with these guys anymore. And I mean, we all heard how some American big politicians were like selling their stocks or something like this, using these guys because they had some news from the parliament which never became public yet, and things. So like, we know this happens. So we need the politicians that get their tongues out of these people's asses, right? Stop using them and say, hey, we need to go back to where producers can sell only to the actual users, okay? Where we will make these guys illegal. That's kind of thrashing on people's profit margins, but this is essentially what you need to do, right? This is where it starts. So we're gonna go back to this, because now we also need to understand why are those speculators are full of shit and what things are working like. So we're gonna look for a guy. Because obviously a lot of analysts that are sitting somewhere in their cushy seat in US and whose job is only to persuade you that paying like $500 for a liter of petrol is the right thing to do because it's the market, will not tell you a lot of stuff. But we're gonna look for, because of the Russians not selling their gas, the Russians are gonna stop selling their gas to Europe and we're all gonna die, we're all gonna freeze. Nope. We're gonna look for a Russian person, analyst, and one of my favorite Russian analysts. To be honest, it's one of my favorite analysts overall. Ooh. Let me go to English. It's this guy, Stepan Yamura. It's this guy. Right? Biography. Yo. Oh. Now this guy is a Russian analyst, and I don't always agree with the conclusion he makes, but one thing he does is his job is to be an analyst. So he's very good at analyzing the markets. He actually runs lessons for one of the investment firms and things like this. He used to be actually running one of the professionals running on one of the Russian TV programs until he left them. He's an investor himself, but one of his main sources of income outside of investing into things, and specifically he specializes in currencies, is he runs those seminars and he's basically finds a lot of interesting facts and figures and things like this. Right, and this is why a lot of stuff I'm gonna tell now and a lot of stuff I'm gonna base this video on is a lot of stuff is what he says. Some of interesting facts he found. And ooh. Sorry. Right, one of the main things people say is that I do apologize, I'm gonna then connect these two videos together, but yeah, my computer just kind of complained about stuff. But we're gonna continue talking about this guy, about Stepan Demura. Right? Just put it away. Okay. So one of the things people say is that Russia is gonna stop selling their gas and oil to Europe and gonna start selling it to China. Right? Well, it's a bit hard to do actually because gas fields in Russia map. Okay, so we're gonna look at this map, right? So sorry, I've been a bit. So there is a lot of gas which is being pumped into Europe from this side of Russia, and the gas which is being piped into China. Let's open this in open image tab and see. Yeah. So this side of Russia, and the gas which is being piped into China and Japan, by the way, and other areas, is actually being piped from this side of Russia. There is no real pipe connections between these gas fields and these gas fields. These are thousands of kilometers of piping that needs to be laid, and we're talking like piping which is high capacity piping, so it's not like you can make one line and you can just pump all this through here to here and then where the gas lines are there into China, right? So Russians cannot sell this gas in China. They simply do not have the means of delivering this to here. There's no pipeline. And to build them is going to take a good 20 years plus. And it's going to cost a fortune. And Russians have not been investing into that kind of projects. They've been investing into building projects into Europe to go around Ukraine, which is here, because there was a big pipeline going through Ukraine, hitting a bit of Belarus, oil and gas going into Europe. And Russians were also investing into building these pipelines from here to here. And a lot of infrastructure they have down here is still the infrastructure that has been built in Soviet Union in 1970s. So what does this mean? Well, it means that they have to get to pump this gas. And the other problem which they have in this area, which is like Europe, people say, oh, Europe is in big trouble, right? And they never say, what about Russia? And the problem Russia has with this area is many of the places where they pump gas from, they still have the equipment which has been installed there in 1970s. What does this mean? It means that they cannot simply stop pumping gas. Like, they have not upgraded the equipment as it had to be upgraded. And many of these places, the levels of the gas in there are at such level that if they cannot stop pumping it because they don't have the equipment there and the know-how. But the only way to do it is to simply completely close it down, the place, essentially blowing things like 1 mile deep and hoping that the gas does not come out, that it gets stuck in there. Which means that if they want to pump the gas again, they have to actually invest into new drilling, new equipment, and things like this, which they haven't done for the last 50 fucking years. So if they stop sending gas to Europe, they already have like full storage capacity. So they had some storage capacity. It's getting full, right? Both on oil side and on gas side. And considering that this year is gonna be a rather warm year because the winter is already finished, Europeans don't need to buy that. They can actually spend the next like 6, 7, 8 months finding and creating new capacities. Obviously, to do that, they have to get rid of these guys. They have to have the balls to get rid of these guys and say, hey, we have to cut down on the speculation by people who are simply interested in how to make money out of money and don't understand how these things work. The experts that tell us that we're all gonna die. I hope I'm gonna stay alive, they can die, I don't mind. Okay? But essentially, the Russians, the only means to do next is to essentially start burning the gas or let it out in the air. Just let it out. burn it or let it float in the air. I don't know what they're gonna do with it. There are some big storage capacities in Germany, in like Eastern Europe, but some of the biggest storage capacities are actually in Ukraine. Why? Well, why do they exist there? Well, because originally Ukraine was the supplier of gas and oil for both Russia and Europe. So in 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, there has been like big gas fields in Ukraine, which is kind of closer to the west of Ukraine, gas and oil fields, same as they were like, it's kind of the same basin as was in Romania, for example. So it's kind of the same basin. And the Soviet government has pumped it all clear out, and then these areas where they used to pump the gas from has been actually converted to use as gas storage facilities. Right? Russians don't have that in there. They have not invested into their infrastructure. That places that got completely sucked dry of gas have not been converted. So that does not exist. So they have to pipe the gas through. Right? They already, because people stop buying their oil, they already having to shut down some of the oil operations in Russia because they don't have the storage capacity and because people don't buy their oil. And essentially they say, look, the only thing we've got left to do is we either shut you down or we're going to have to start putting oil into the, like, just let it flow out. And again, some of those are not reopenable. Some of them, the equipment is quite old, and the only way to stop it the oil coming out is to essentially close down the hole they drilled for like long distance, and then if they need to get the oil out again, they will have to drill again. So essentially when people start screaming our gas is going to be expensive because Russia is not going to sell to us, well, they cannot stop selling. Oh, they can. If they do that and start burning gas, like, you know, just burning it out, obviously we all understand that, you know, the sanctions are going to become so bad that they will going to have to start, like, they will start supplying gas even if they have to carry it in the fucking bags. I don't know, like, you know, in the balloons. They'll fill up balloons with gas and carry them to Europe because that's how bad the sanctions gonna be. That's because nobody's gonna forgive them the destruction of environment as badly if they destroy environment for all of us as badly as the shit they do in Ukraine. So on this point of time, we see that we can stop listening to speculators and we can start listening to people who actually know a thing or two about how this technology works. And the guy which I talked about, this guy, Stepan Demura, that's the data he picked up from people he actually knows in the Russian gas industry. Right? It's not some guy sitting in US or in Europe whose job is to persuade you that I don't know, it's impossible to have low gas and petrol prices. No, because those guys are paid by speculators. They are paid by these guys, and they're paid by the big corporation like oil corporations, because they want to keep these guys, because this gives them the excuses to have a multi-billion profit margins, right? I think Shell made like what, nearly 200 billion just in the last few months, and by the end of the year they're probably gonna be like at half a billion or trillion, half a trillion. They made like 200 billion. They will probably be by half a trillion by the end of the year because of this. And most of the experts, their job is to make you believe in this. We do not have a real market with the exchange at the moment because of speculation. And we need to have the balls for people to say, hey guys, what is it that we need to stop this? Unfortunately, our politicians do not have the balls to do that, right? Because they have opened their buttocks too wide for people who own this and this and this. Yeah, their buttocks are wide fucking open. So this is why people at the moment paying the price for petrol as high as they do. For gas, for heating, for everything. The reason you pay this is because of this, because we do not have a straight market economy as it stands. Right? So people will tell me, what about coal? Right? We buy lots of Russian coal. Well, actually, you do not. Okay? Yeah. Maps. So this is Google Maps, and it doesn't show them all, but we're gonna go to this map. So this is a map of Russian invasion in Ukraine. And the coal you're buying is coming from these areas. From this area here. Lugansk and Donetsk. There's a big coal basin which goes all the way into Russia and then goes into Ukraine. But in Russian side of things, they have closed their coal mines long time ago. There was some still going, but very few, and this is why Russia has not really been a big coal trader. But now they're claiming that the coal they're selling is because they've reopened those mines, which is bullshit. Essentially, the way what used to happen is that a lot of coal used to come from Ukraine. And for Ukraine, coal was coal, metal, and food produce. They were like, so there's a big steel production there used to be a big steel production industry in this area, which had a lot to do with being able to get the coal from here, but also a lot of coal was coming from this area and being sold to Europe. And this was a big way of getting lots of like currency, like euros, dollars, into Ukraine economy. As a matter of fact, like Ukrainian miners, they were some of the best paid workers. It was a very good, horrible job, very dirty, quite a bit dangerous, not as bad as people think, but still, obviously going down the mine was a bit dangerous. And Ukrainian government, not always super successfully, but was also managing to make the coal mine owners to invest at least a little bit into the mines to keep them going, because that was the way they would get currency. And for a long time, people who'd get into the power in Ukraine, some of the people who held the power, they were originating from here, and they were like, look, we need that currency if we want to keep the power, because this gives the Ukraine certain trade balances, and then we're not gonna all go and have to sell all our food just to be able to afford lighting or something like this. So that was the coal that used to come to Europe. And that's the coal that Europe is buying now. Essentially, well, the way it looks is that the best way for Europe to guarantee its energy independence is to give Ukrainians the weapons to free up that area and to get the Russians out, right? Because this is where the coal is going to come from, and this is the way to guarantee the energy supplies and energy independence. Essentially, one of the major reasons Russians invaded this area was because it was such a big on coal, metal reserves, and they've recently found that gas. Okay, so yeah, by fracturing the kind of gas which you get by fracturing the soil underneath, and then you pipe the gas in. Well, there was a big gas reserves like this found also in the east of Ukraine. And again, this is a Europeans like this. These are the areas where there's like not as highly densely populated. So the population is less dense, and something like this could be done in Ukraine, in the east of Ukraine, to get to tap into huge reserves of gas. So essentially, the European independence of Russian gas, I think it's called shale gas. I'm not 100% sure. Let's look it up. Yeah, shale gas. So found in shale rocks. So by fracturing that rocks, yeah, we've got the same picture. So we got it right. Shale gas. So, and huge reserves of shale gas have been found in Ukraine, and because it's not as densely populated as Europe, it was easier to extract it. And with the technology development, the way it's reached in US, not only is it easier to extract this gas with new technologies, it actually ends up being almost cheaper than the gas that they already dig up in Russia, because where they dig up the gas in Russia, where they take it, it's one of those areas where it's not easy to get it out. So it actually costs a lot not just in digging it up, not in just keeping running the equipment, even running the ones where they already have a lot, putting in the new equipment, but also the transportation costs from these areas. Because let me just look it up. Okay. Yeah, from here to here, it's still, they have the pipelines, but it's still thousands of miles, and it still costs money to transport that gas across those distances. Whereas Ukraine is right here, and there is already a huge gas pipe network going through Ukraine into Europe. So essentially, if we look at this, what we see is like the best way for Europe and for the world to have energy independence of Russia is to help Ukrainians to get the Russian the fuck out. This is what happens when you put in at least a little bit of research into the areas which are there. And when you start understanding that the people that tell us that our energy price is going to have to be super high because the Russians will not sell us gas anymore, right? And or like, when people say we have to put an embargo on buying Russian oil and gas. Guys, if you do that, and I'm Ukrainian, I'd like it to be like this, but essentially what happens is that the Russians have got nowhere for this gas to go. At some point of time, we have to start buying it, not because of the economic reasons, but because of the natural reasons. Essentially, they're gonna have to start burning gas, or we have to find ways of forcing them to lock down those places where they dig it up from now. which is next to impossible. They'll just do it just to spite everyone fucking off. Right? But having those gas areas in Ukraine is one of the key perspectives to make Europe more independent of Russian gas, right? But we can drop the price of the gas and oil, right? Simply by removing the speculators from the market, simply by returning the market back to its original purpose and value, where the companies that produce oil and gas can sell oil and gas to the companies who actually use it. So for example, where Shell oil production or Shell gas production companies can sell that gas directly to, I don't know, I think it was BASF, I think, no, those guys went out of business, but to any company that uses gas to produce things. So like where they can sell this gas directly to the companies who actually take care about our heating and electricity, rather than having another 50 fucking people in between who essentially are trying to make money out of money without actually investing anything into production of any product. Can we finally agree that there are markets where speculation is not an option? Whether it's food markets, whether it's the energy markets. Yes, it's okay when we want to break up big conglomerates to stop them from having a monopoly on things. Good, great. But we need to also understand that the market is only as good as long as it's a market and not a place for speculators to advance their ways of making money out of air. Okay? As long as companies make profit from the things they produce, then we can talk. I hope that helps. I do apologize again for the break in the video in the middle. My system just kind of crashed, so I had to restart the video. I will put them together as one video, and I will put this on Facebook. Oh, not Facebook, on YouTube. I hope people will watch this video, and I hope you guys gonna start raising the noise. I'm but one person, and I personally don't expect this video to be seen by many. But if you are one of these people, and okay, share, like, that might help. But also start thinking about it and start maybe doing other things. Okay, I've done this video, I'll see what else I can do about life, but other than that, we need to start removing the speculative price bonus for our energy, for our food. We need to start removing, the story I told originally about this market. We need to start removing the criminals that took over the market and turned it into a system which makes money out of air. Once we remove the criminals, once we remove the thugs, only then can we truly say that we are independent. Only then can we truly make sure that we have true growth and true prices on our petrol pumps, or for our heating bills, for our electricity bills. Until you clear that up, nothing's gonna change. No matter which sanctions they're gonna put on Russia, people still gonna end up buying some Russian gas for cheap by finding a way of getting around the sanctions, and then running a speculative game and getting billions and billions of profits on it. So long as we have the speculators the rogue governments like Putin's and many others will continue getting super profits while robbing their people and turning them into monsters that they have become. This is going to repeat itself until we start fighting with the cause of this, the criminals that took over our markets. Thank you very much. Goodbye.